All right, guys, and welcome back to the Ireland Podcast YouTube channel. Today, we are finally doing that tier list ranking video that I was saying I was going to do a while ago for the new season of Big Brother after to the returning players. I said I was going to do one for All Stars 2 all by itself. So, just like that one, is just purely based upon this season's gameplay, and that's it. Not my personal opinion on the players, nothing like that. Purely based off the gameplay they showed in this season. So, like, let's say I thought one of these people were really good in a previous season, doesn't matter. Only matters about this one, and that's it. So, starting off with Bailey here. I guess first I should actually explain categories. Best is going to be who I thought played the best game. It could be one to two, but no more than two people. And if there's one person I truly believe is much better than everyone else, they'll be on that ranking. Great, great players. Someone that had a good chance of winning, made it far, played a good game, whether it was socially, strategically, competitively, whatever it was, they landed themselves there. Good. They played an all right game. They had a shot at winning, but not as great of a shot as the people in the above tiers, obviously. You know, and Masters okay is they played the game, but they didn't really have a shot at winning. They were always in the wrong situation or whatever it is, but at least they tried. And then bad is just people that played really bad games, people that got evicted early on, or people that just played awfully. So start off with Bailey here. She's gonna go right into the meh slash okay category. I like Bailey. I liked her gameplay. And this season she did a really good job at living up to playing a better social game. And that's Big Brother. Big Brother's a social game. And Bailey went out of her way to try and build relationships, try and talk to everyone. She used it as a way to try and stay in the majority. Obviously, it didn't work. She ended up on the outside of that alliance, but she still had decent connections within that alliance that kept her protected early on. I think that's what makes Bailey's game okay. Obviously, it's not necessarily a good game because she was on the outs. She didn't realize she was on the outs till it was too late, and there wasn't much she could do from there. She obviously is not a great competitor in the sense that she wins a lot. Uh, her ability on the challenge a lot different than her abilities in Big Brother, but that's because the competition level is a lot different and have different assets involved. But yeah, I think she's an okay player. I think she went every way, played some decent social games. She had some great strategy talks while she was in that house, and I think she at least tried. So now moving on to Christmas. Whether your opinion on Christmas as a person is negative or positive, none of that really matters in the situation. Her gameplay is good. I think this year, what separated her from being good and not great was her lack of strategy and playing to make moves that would benefit her individual game. Um, Earlier on, she had easy ways of making a big move, such as evicting someone like Tyler early on, and then using that to build bonds and bridges with other players that were in the bottom, such as like Kevin, Davon, and Bailey, and use that to her advantage to make an alliance that's going to help her get further and more to the end than the alliance full of stronger players that she was in that were always going to cut her around 5 or 4 no matter what. And she wasn't able to really compete with them in the same way she's been able to compete with. She would. All right, my bad. A little bit of a cutout there. But, anyways, like I was saying, with Christmas, her biggest mistake was that she didn't play enough of an individual game on that strategical front that would have been able to get her to the end where she could have won the game. She definitely had a chance of winning if she did make those moves. She did wait a little too long when she finally did try to make those moves. But at that point, she didn't have a lot of numbers and it was too late. Hence why I do think that her aligning midway through the game with the weaker or the minority players that are at the bottom would have benefited her at that midway point, especially having that easy move to make and put on her resume like Tyler. I know they had a really close relationship, and that's why she's in the good tier because she was amazing socially. She's really good at connecting with people, building those relationships up, and they get her far in the game, and they got her really far. Right, like she got, I think, was a fourth or fifth place, and that's still really good. But I think she could have really had a chance to win if she aligned with the right people at the right time. And that was my issue. I think she burnt the wrong bridges at the time where she should have been working on building that bridge stronger. And I think that's what separates her from being a good and a great player this season. Next on the list, well, the reason we have the best tier is because there's not a single person that comes even close to what Cody was able to do this season. Now, erasing all whatever pregame bullshit may or may not have happened, we don't truly know all the complications of the pregame perspective on the season. And that's why it's really hard for me to say Cody shouldn't be one of the best because of pregame things when I don't truly understand the actual the dots that are really connected before going into the season. Like obviously I know that it helped him to like have relationships like Nicole and Danielle before the season comes in, but this based purely on what he was able to accomplish while in the house, he still played without a doubt a memorizing, incredible game on all fronts. Not only was he a beast in competitions, I think he won the most competitions this season. I think without doubt, really. I think he won like one or two more than I think the other people were that were in the running. I think it was like Enzo or Christmas. I could be wrong. It's still a little foggy. It's been a while when it comes to competition stuff, but I definitely remember this dude's stellar social game. There wasn't a single person that didn't love Cody, and there was a single person that didn't think that they were 100% in with him and whatever he was doing. Even people that were very clearly on the bottom really thought that they had some sort of relationship and connection with Cody that was somehow more special than anyone else, and that would be enough to protect them in the game. And that's what made Cody's game so great. And when Cody burned people, he did a good job at not insulting people. You know, he didn't add insult to injury, and he made sure that that would help him in the jury management perspective of the game. Not adding insult to injury is what separates a great player winning and then a great player losing. Like Paul in the previous seasons, he always added that little insult to injury, and he could never admit to his fault, and he could never admit to the way he played the game, and that's what lost him the game. And Cody did the exact opposite, constantly admitting to how he played, constantly taking credit for his moves, and never taking the game too personal and taking it a step too far. And that's how he was able to play his dominant game and still get the win. And that's really impressive. Jury management's a huge part of the game, and Cody perfected it this season. That's why he won unanimously. Um, Other than that, his strategical game, pretty incredible. He came in with the obvious strategy, build this majority alliance, still have those connections and relationships outside of that majority alliance that ensures his protection no matter who wins. And that's kind of what happened. And though the minority didn't really get to win a lot of competitions this season, or they just couldn't pull through a lot, it wouldn't have really mattered because in strategy talks, very rarely did Cody's name come up as an actual possible nomination. There's very few people this season, aside from like Janelle and Kaser, really, that would have really taken that shot at Cody. And that is really impressive. In a cast full of 16 labeled All Stars and great players, he was able to make sure that 13 of them had no interest on ever taking a shot at him, at least until later on in the game. And at that point, he was ready to beast out and get to the end. Hence why he got 0 nominations for the entire season. That's an incredible feat to achieve, no matter how great you are, and especially with the simple fact to add insult to injury in that perspective, him winning that final HOH, getting to dictate who he's going to be in the final 2 with, making the right decision by bringing Enzo over Nicole, and never actually ever truly getting nominated. He is now the only player in the history of the game to truly have 0 nominations. This includes forced nominations. Derek with 0, except for 1 forced nomination at Final 3. Same with Danielle Reyes and Jason Guy. 0 throughout the season, but they were forced nominees in the Final 3. And that's because they weren't able to win the final HOH, but Cody was. And that was the one thing that I thought Cody needed to do to play the perfect game, in a sense that he did everything right. He had no eviction votes against him because he never touched the block. So no one ever had the opportunity. And he never touched the block because even though I think he won, 4 HOHs on that season, 4 HOHs is a lot, but that gives so many opportunities for people to put Cody on the block and take the shot at him. At least throw him on the block, right? You'd think he would have at least touched the block at some point so they couldn't say that he never got nominated. But nope, his social game, like I said, phenomenal. He made sure that he had those relationships with everybody, and his strategy is impeccable. It worked out perfectly, masterfully, really flawlessly. His game all came together at the end, like I said, with winning that final HOH, being able to make that decision of who he's sitting next to can be the difference break between the 500,000 and the 20,000. And he did a great job, but at making the right decision that led him to glory. And I can't help but say he's a phenomenal player. Definitely one of the greatest winners, in my opinion. And he Despite the season being horrible, I could probably go back and rewatch it just to watch his gameplay. So dominant and a really great game to watch for sure. Next on the list, we have Danielle Donato. I kind of wish there was a tier between good and okay because I feel like that's kind of where she would sit. Right now, I'm going to lean a little bit more towards good, just for the fact that she did make it into that final 7, and she did get taken out during the triple eviction, which is a big twist. But she almost made it into that final 6 where she could have beasted to the end or whatever. But yeah, Danielle, I think that she had a really up and down game. She started off the game very, very strong, probably with the strongest beginning of the season to anyone, even arguably better than Cody's in the sense that everyone trusted her. Even the people that didn't trust Cody or Tyler, like Kaser and Janelle, that were onto their game early on, went to Danielle and said, "Hey, here's what you need to know. I know this. I know that. I know this. I trust you. We got to work together." And her social dominance at the beginning of the game was beautiful. She had a really great hold on the cast from a social standpoint. Everyone liked her. They talked to her. They told her things, and they wanted to work with her. Midway through the game, and this is the big downfall for a lot of people. At that midway point when Tyler tried to self-evict, and we're going to talk about this a lot because that's a big moment in my opinion. It's the moment that won Cody the game. Cody being able to keep Tyler at that moment put Cody in almost an unbreakable situation. You couldn't touch him at that point because Cody used that perfectly to his advantage. And Danielle, I think that was her opportunity to take that shot at Tyler, essentially taking the shot at Cody, putting herself in a better situation. But she failed to do so. She when Danielle had the opportunity to get rid of Tyler over Ian, she didn't do it. When Christmas had the opportunity to get rid of Tyler instead of splitting up Bailey and Davon, she didn't do it. Once again, I think these are game breaking decisions that can truly be the reasoning for your entire downfall in the game. I think for Danielle, it would have really separated the difference between her really winning this game and losing the game. She did, like I said, she did a fantastic job though socially. Like even at that midway point, she still did a great job in maintaining relationships, having some sort of relationship with Kevin, or obviously a really good relationship with Davon, or even David, though it's not as strong. And then obviously her relationship within her alliance was really good for a little while. But one of those situations is Big Brother's all about timing. You have to make the right move at the right time. Danielle failed to make that right move at that right time, and she didn't realize this at the time, but majority of her alliance were now strategizing against her, and she was pretty much as good as gone when the triple eviction came up. Everyone kind of knew it was going to happen, and that's what happens when you don't take that shot when you get the opportunity. Outside of that, I do think Danielle played a really good game. She started off really strong, and she could have been the winner of this season if she just played her cards a little bit smarter. Moving on to David. Whew, meh slash okay. I would say out of the people on the bottom this season, David probably played the best game. He did a good job socially early, like really, really early on. He did make a lot of mistakes early on as well, though. Kind of being labeled as a weasel, snake, you can't trust because you say things to him and somehow they kind of just ended up getting around. Like the All Guys Alliance, you press David about anything at the beginning of the season, he'd kind of drop and tell you whatever the hell you wanted to know. And that was the big issue with David's game. But David did a really good job adapting as the weeks went by into his position that allowed him to stay protected. Though he obviously never was able to work his way through or into that majority alliance, it's a really tough thing to do in a game like this. He still did a good job at constantly putting himself higher and higher and higher on the ladder of who's going to go home next. And as much as it sucks, as much as I would love to see him play a bigger, better game, he was in that situation for so long that was kind of the best he could do, is just put himself in a tiny bit better position every week. It's just try to drift by week by week by week, and he did that. He did a really good job at making sure that his target would somehow decrease, and he would have the right conversations at the right time that would keep the people in power like at bay, make them feel like, hey, okay, we don't have to take a shot at David right now. We're going to eventually, but we don't have to do it right now. Davon, I'm also going to put her in mass slash okay. She's also a player that I was on the bottom, but she definitely played really hard, a really entertaining game. That's for sure. I like the way Davon plays the game. She's a really aware player. She sees things that go on around her, and she can point them out instantly. And she can pinpoint this person's working with that person, and she gets all this information. And the big issue with her game is that she doesn't do a great job managing that information and telling the right people. And she kind of tells too many people, or she tells the wrong people, or she'll tell it right away, and that's the main issue with her game. This season, she started off a little bit weak on the fact that she wasn't aware of the things that were happening around her. She was trying to play a much more social game, a game that definitely relied more on her social aspects, and I think she was doing a really good job. Like she reached out to Tyler, Cody, two people that were in power early on, built a good relationship with them. She also had a fantastic relationship with Janelle, Kaser, Davon. Uh, um, she obviously tried to, and Davon obviously tried to build a relationship with David. She obviously had her incredible final two relationship with Bailey. Um, Obviously, her relationship with Danielle and Nicole were fantastic. She did a good job at trying to reach out, and even like Christmas, she tried to talk to and build a relationship with. There really wasn't that many. And Kevin, obviously, she had an incredible relationship with Kevin. There wasn't a lot of people this season that she didn't try to have a good relationship with, and she didn't have a bad relationship with a lot of people really at all. It was really a situation of she wasn't in the numbers, and she fought to try and build her own and get there. It was just tough getting people onto her side because like as the game goes, and this is kind of the issue with Big Brother these days, is when those structures of alliances are built and the longer they're in fluent movement, they eventually become rock solid and they're really hard to break into. And this season was a great example of that. The alliance built right away, and every week that people weren't taking a shot at that alliance, it was just solidifying more and more and more and more, and it became that much harder, especially without anyone in the bottom really winning any competitions aside maybe a couple of vetoes. Never having the HOH power makes it really really hard to put themselves into that alliance in any way, because it's like what does anyone in the alliance really gain directly right away from reaching outside of their alliance to work with people that aren't in power ever? So it's kind of like a luck thing in a sense. They just could not win when they needed to, and this season was really about breaking that alliance. And sadly, Davon tried to. She definitely went out of her way to try to. She won that power of veto, which was huge. That was the first big kind of game-shaking moment. Even if Ian ended up going home, um, she was proving that all the time that she was playing the game and she knew what she had to do eventually, and she was trying to get it done. She just couldn't. Next on this list, basically the reason why there is a great tier, we have Enzo. Enzo, I've always been a huge fan of the way Enzo plays this game. There's not a lot of people that can play this game as well as he can on a social level. Enzo's incredible the way that he's a captivating person. He knows how to tell stories. He tells some of the most simplistic, ridiculous stories, but he tells them in this great big way that makes everybody really interested in what he's saying, and people laugh, they love it. He's a funny guy, he's charismatic, you like him, and you don't find him much of a threat because people don't consider him really smart. And then that's when people tend to miss out that this is a guy that has really great strategical knowledge of the game, and he has good strategical depth in his game as well, and he understands that his game is about timing and making the right moves. Sadly, the reason why he's not in best tier and is in great tier despite having 0 nominations for the entire season until the final 3, obviously, which is incredible, very impressive gameplay right there, that proves the social game right there, is because like Christmas, his lack of making individual moves are the reason he ultimately lost. And he loses a 9-0 in that final jury vote to Cody. And it's heartbreaking. You never want to lose 9-0, especially when you played a great game, like a great social game like he did. But that lack of making moves that would more benefit him individually. The big move I think that lost him the game was not voting out Nicole when he had the opportunity in the triple eviction. It would have put him in a better situation and Cody in a worse situation, which would have given him more power to decide what happens in the late game, which would have been perfect for his speech at the end and giving jurors an actual reason to vote for him, right? Because you can't vote for Enzo over Cody when they're at the end, because you can acknowledge both great players, but everything Enzo did, Cody just did better. And every move Enzo was involved in, Cody dictated. So it was like, even though he made great moves and he was a part of everything, Enzo played a fantastic game. sitting next to Cody is that worst scenario if you don't make any moves to separate yourself from him, because Cody dictated everything that was happening. And Enzo didn't do what he had to do at the time he had the opportunities to separate himself from Cody, giving him very little to defend himself with. And that sucked. It really did suck. Like, seeing him get 0 votes and everything definitely sucked, and seeing him not really be able to say anything at the finale just because what can he say? It sucks because I'm a huge Enzo fan. I love his gameplay. Like I said, his social game is incredible, but it is his fault. He lost the game based off his inability to make the move he had to make to benefit him and not Cody. He always focused on making moves that benefited him, but also benefited Cody, and most times benefited Cody more than him, and that's ultimately why he lost. But he's fantastic. He had a great chance of winning. Was definitely a front runner the entire season, in my opinion. I think he was 1, 2, or 3 at some point at an entire season. There was never a point where he wasn't in the top 3 of running for the season. So, yeah, great game by Enzo. I liked it. I enjoyed it, and I thought he was pretty good. And in the okay category, we have Ian. Ian is someone that I really enjoyed in his previous season. I think a lot of people did. He has a great understanding of the game. He's a student of the game, and I don't know. It was disappointing this season, being one of the only winners this season. I know that wasn't a big storyline with Big Brother in comparison to like Survivor and other shows like Winner. You're a winner. It's a big deal. And in Big Brother, I feel like people don't really care as much. With Ian, I was definitely expecting though to see more of a strategical side of his game. At times when we finally felt like we were getting those opportunities and seeing him ready to take a chance and ready to make that move that he knew he had to make, he'd always end up backing out or just not getting the power to make the move. So his game was kind of like it could build up, build up, build up, build up, but it would flame out and fall apart. And that was a lot of his strategical game. Other than that, there was a lot of uh, socially, I thought he was decent. He did a good job trying to build relationships and connections. I do think that he did do a bad job at building relationships with people at the bottom and building those stronger relationships. Like his strongest relationship in the game was probably Nicole. And the issue with that is that since Nicole was in the majority and he wasn't, all that relationship really did was benefit her and not him. And he should have definitely tried to build more of a relationship with people in the bottom. He did a great job, obviously, building a great connection with Kaser. He had his relationship with Janelle, obviously. I just wish he did more to try and build relationships with Devon, David, Bailey, even Kevin, just because they could have solidified something that would have at least given them numbers, so they could have had more of a dictated role and have more of a decision-making process that would allow them to decide who would go home in certain scenarios instead of just having to just let the majority decide. And that's my only issue. Like I said, Ian's a person that if all the things go the right way early on for him, he's a dangerous weapon at the end of the game. And sadly, those things just didn't fall into place for him early on. And he didn't do a great job at trying to get those things to fall in his place. So, yeah, I put him in the match okay category. He's probably a little bit he's closer to bad than he is to good, in my opinion, this season. But I think he did try in a lot of scenarios. And that it could have been different if there's a different cast. Mad/okay is going to go to Janelle. She's also closer to bad than good. Janelle definitely tried to play a different game than she's played in her previous seasons. With her knowing she can't heavily rely on competitions like she would have in her prime in season 6 and 7. She did try to build social connections and she tried to play a more strategical game, figuring out with Kaser who's doing what, who's doing this where, and trying to use that to her advantage. But she just couldn't make those connections early on at the right time. She clearly was drawn to Keisha, Memphis, Kaser, Devon, Bailey early on in the season, and those just weren't the right way to go for her if she wanted to do damage. You know, Memphis was being dishonest with her the entire season, kind of playing her the entire season. Kaser could never really get his footing in the game. Neither could Devon. Bailey, obviously Keisha was evicted first, so there was not a lot that Janelle could do without being able to win competitions. I think she was in a bad position. She came in as the legend of the season. You know, 3 times she's already played now. This is her 4th time. She's now the She has the most seasons ever played by a Big Brother player now at 4. She got third place twice in her first 2 seasons. Janelle is the person she comes in and she has that target that's always bigger uh, than anyone else's, no matter what. It doesn't matter how she actually performs. It doesn't matter how she actually plays. That target just so big, people just can't let it go by. So yeah, I think Janelle did a decent job with the things, with a lot of what she was giving in terms of opportunity. Like she was giving, like with the tools she had, she did a good job at trying to play the game. She wasn't giving a lot of opportunity. She wasn't giving a lot of great tools. I did just move her to the bad tier because if I'm being completely objective, her gameplay just wasn't good at really at all. She did a good job of figuring things out, obviously with the help of Kaser, but she did a really bad job, I think, of trying to make movements on when figuring those things out. I'm also going to move Ian down a tier. It doesn't mean really, really bad. It's just the perspective in comparison to everyone else's game in this season, by the way. So just they're just named. Kaser. I want to put Kaser in mad/okay, and because Kaser is a gamer. I was shocked at how much I genuinely enjoyed Kaser's game because I never liked him in his previous seasons because I always felt like he was a little cocky for a guy that never showed anything. But having live feeds, you could really see this guy was like a computer at times, the way that he processed this game, and he was constantly figuring things out. It was like watching him put a puzzle together. It was, oh, this is here, that there. This guy's talking to this guy, this girl's talking to this guy, this girl's talking to that girl. Okay, I'm figuring it. Everything's out, and he's figuring out these voting block alliances or whatever, these connections, these relationships, and he's almost always perfectly pinpointed every time. And the only thing that really got by him was early game Danielle. Like I said, incredible early game by Danielle, and she was able to kind of just swindle by Kaser in the game. Um, and that was the only thing Kaser really never got his grasp on fully until more towards the end of his run in the house. But watching the way that he plays strategically and coming up with the dynamics, figuring out the dynamics of the house were really impressive. He's very aware of the things that happen around him. He understands power dynamics and the power shifts, and he understands who are the biggest threats. I do think that he didn't go at it the best way from a strategical standpoint or a social standpoint on trying to relay this information to other people. But you could also see the frustration in him coming from, like, in his mind, it's so easy. But in other people's mind, he has to understand that it's not so easy. And his social game could have been better. But I do think he definitely tried. He put in like um, hourless nights of work trying so hard to get people on his side. I think he should have done more. He should have done more early on to work his way into the majority alliance. I think waiting so long to go to Christmas, and he obviously didn't have a great read on Christmas either, but waiting so long to start reaching out to people that were in that majority alliance to protect him, it was too little too late. And if he did it earlier on, he may have been able to build something and then develop it as he still was able to survive week by the first few weeks. Um, Sadly, I don't think he went at it the right way. I think Big Brother, as much as it is a game where you want to work with the people you like the most and you want to just flip everything, it can be very hard. Like I said, if you don't get the power, I think Kaser needed to go where the power was and then try to break it on the inside out, which is a tough thing to do, obviously, but I wish he did it. Keisha, she's just going to go in bad simply for the fact that I have no idea of how she would have played this season. Obviously, she was evicted first. She did a pretty bad job of handling that first week, not really speaking to people, not doing great on the campaign, not really proving value to people to make them want to keep her. Other than that, she was entertaining and everything, but yeah, I love Keisha. She's great in season 10, but this season she didn't do anything. And obviously she didn't have much of an opportunity to do anything or much time to do anything. So there's not much really to say. It's not necessarily, it's not that she's obviously a bad player. It's obviously not that she's necessarily did anything bad, but she didn't really do anything to change her situation that could have saved her in the game. Kevin, man, I want to put Kevin in Masters okay because there was times where I was like, that's the Kevin I remember from season 11 that was insanely good at the game. But Kevin had so many bad reads so early on, he was lost in this house. I mean, the first week when he got nominated and he blamed Janelle for his nomination instead of the guy who nominated him, Cody, I thought that was kind of ridiculous. And I couldn't believe that that was actually happening in front of my eyes. I was genuinely shocked. I was like, Kevin, come on, man. You got to know the game better than that. Why would you blame the person in the bottom who was supposed to go up instead of you for you going up? That don't make any sense. But Kevin, like I said, he had a bad read early on. Towards the end of his run in the house, though, he did seem to have a better grasp on what was going on. He started wanting to play the game more strategically, but he spent so much of it moping around, so much of it playing a very passive game that when it came time for him to, when he did start wanting to play aggressively, it was too late because he didn't do the work that he had to do to have the opportunity to start playing more aggressively. Like in season 11, he did a great job laying low, playing a social game, a fantastic social game that allowed him to, when the time came where he could actually start playing more aggressively and actually start making moves, he had the groundwork laid out for him that allowed him to have those opportunities. But in this game, he didn't do that. So his lack of social game early on made it so that later on in the game, when he wanted to make moves, he couldn't. It was too late, and he wasn't able to win any HOHs. Once again, like not being able to win HOHs, that's the big downfall of this alliance. You're looking at these 8 right there, and all 8 of them have one big issue is they never was able to get power, and that is the big thing when it comes to them. And it sucks that I have to rank them so low because I love pretty much all of them really, but I have to be honest. Not having any power in a game of a majority alliance makes it very hard to do anything, and well, we've seen how it all played out. Now we have Memphis. I'm tempted to put Memphis in good, but I'm gonna have to put him in great. I didn't like Memphis personality-wise, but that's whatever. Because gameplay-wise, I think he was very good. I've always viewed Memphis as one of the most underrated players probably to ever played a game. In season 10, he was fantastic. He was one of the first, he's one of the very few players in his position that was able to do so well on a social front that he was in the final four with a guaranteed spot in the final two because all 3 of those people were going to take him to the final two. And not a lot of times do people end up in that situation. Memphis played really well. He should have got a couple of votes, in my opinion, in season 10. I love Dan. Dan's gameplay incredible. 7-0, sure. I would have been okay with a 5-2. I think Memphis deserved a couple. This time around, though, Memphis, you could tell, was playing to win. He was not playing to stay behind someone else. Memphis's biggest grand issue, and the reason why he lost this game, is that he waited way too long to finally try and make that move against Cody, because that was the big thing. You had, I would say, about 5 people this season that really had a chance to win, and or 6 really, right? Basically that alliance, right? And all they had to do was take a shot at Cody, and they all waited too long. And with Memphis here, he really had to take a shot at Cody in that triple eviction, and him going for David instead was that big mistake I think he really made. He should have went for Cody, really should have threw him up on the block next to Nicole, looked to make a deal with David because David was the weaker player, and that would have been his opportunity to say that he finally broke away from his majority alliance and made a move that was beneficial for him individually. Memphis didn't do that, but his social game, like I said, was pretty fantastic. Though people would acknowledge that he's a cranky old man or whatever, but he did a good job of just not getting nominated. I don't think he got nominated till the final 5 or 4, which eventually got evicted, but never touched the block until then. He dominated competitions pretty much. Like early on, he won a decent amount, which gave him the power and control and made it so he was able to take credit for moves that were happening. So even if Cody was really behind the overall decision making, Memphis was able to wear the moves on his sleeve because he was the HOH and he ultimately had the final say in the sense of who was going to be on that block. And Memphis, who is a great social player and a great strategist, was able to do it, and people would give him credit because they acknowledged he had a big part in the season. Like I said, Memphis not being nominated for majority of the season, fantastic social play. He's great at building relationships. Obviously, his relationship with Christmas, very strong. His relationship with Enzo, very strong. Cody, very strong for majority of the season. Memphis's 2 biggest downfalls, in my opinion, was his lack of ability to build relationships with people that were in the bottom, which would have made him a target if they ever did get power. He got lucky. They didn't get power. It's really more of a luck thing than it is a excuse me, than it really is a game thing. And his big mistake was not making that move against Cody when he had opportunity because it became too late. And Cody and Enzo went out at the end. And Cody, Enzo, and Nicole really went out at the end. There wasn't much Memphis could do. So yeah, I could see here. And obviously, I spent more time on other people, but I think Memphis's game is pretty obvious. Like he played well, not getting nominated for a while, but he made those a couple mistakes that separates him from being the winner of the season. He could have won and being a loser. Nicole isn't bad. Not only is she like, not only is Nicole like, she got evicted early, but for the few minutes that Nicole was even on the season. She was just horrible. She did a bad job building relationships. She built a few strong relationships, but outside of that, she didn't really build much of anything, and blamed her being on the bottom on people that had nothing to do with it. Same kind of thing with Kevin. Um, yeah, I mean, she was kind of clueless while she was in the house, and I'm not trying to hate her or anything, but she played a very, very bad game. She was very unaware of her surroundings, and in a game where being aware of your surroundings and taking advantage of that is really important, she just did not do a good job at figuring the things out she had to figure out. There's not much to say about her golf. She got evicted week 2, but I think she would have done a much better job of putting up a fight to stay if she played smarter. Next on the list is the man, the myth, the fan favorite, the golden boy, Tyler. Love Tyler. I think he's an incredible player. I think season 20 he was amazing. I'll go more obviously in depth on his season 20 season some other time. This season, he wanted to quit halfway through. He nearly self evicted. He asked to be evicted. He made the mistake of not striking at at Danielle and Nicole earlier on, because the longer they stayed in, the more power Cody had because he was closer to them than Tyler was to them. And that was the biggest thing about the season between like the fight between Cody and Tyler and the power dynamics of the whole thing is sure they're in the same alliance, but the relationships Cody built with a lot of the people in the alliance were so much more tighter than the relationships Tyler built with them. And because he didn't take those shots when he had those opportunities, and he obviously really tried to in triple eviction, which is like the perfect time, but his lack of building up to that triple eviction and really building into making that move against, especially Nicole, like the move against Danielle, he was building that up already, but he never really mentioned going after Nicole a lot. So when the opportunity arisen and he didn't have Enzo on his side, sure, Enzo should have done that. Like I said, and it was the move that lost Enzo the game. But Tyler didn't really do himself any favors by not building up to that move so that when the opportunity did arise in the triple eviction, he could strike at Nicole. But he was so focused on really one player at a time. And I think that's Tyler's biggest issue. And in the season 20, he did a really great job of always being 4 or 5 steps ahead of everyone else and having this game planned out. This season, he kind of went with the flow a lot. And I think that's what lost him the game. His social game, though, amazing from the beginning. He walked in, people were like, I love this guy. This guy's great. He said, no, so nice. I like this dude. He's funny. And it lasted throughout the rest of the season. People really liked him. He's socially amazing. Strategically, I thought this season, though, was a big step down, and Tyler just really was not able to make a lot of strategical moves, and he was not in a position of power as much as he should have been, and he was mainly at fault for that. And I think that that's the big thing that separates Tyler from being a good and a great player this season. Nicole, gotta put her in gray. I know a lot of people are gonna be upset about this. I think Nicole's a fantastic player. I think she was great in 18, really bad in 16, and pretty great in this season. Yeah, she could have won. She could be the first ever 2-time winner of Big Brother because she played great. Her social game was fantastic. She did out of all the people in the majority alliance, she probably did the best at building relationships aside from Cody and Enzo with the people on the bottom. And that's what this game is all about, in my opinion. My opinion is making sure that you're protected from all fronts. It doesn't matter how great you are with the majority if you don't have that protection when the majority loses. And in this case, the majority never really lost, so it worked out in their favor anyway. But Nicole was essentially in a better position than Memphis that entire season because of her relationship she's built with people on that bottom. And she made enemies, but she did a really good job at when she was against someone at making it clear she was against someone. So people knew where her head was at and they kind of knew where she was aiming. So people never felt like they were at risk with Nicole. And that's a big thing in this game. I think having that upfront ability of your gameplay and being straight up and honest with people when you're looking at them and you're saying, hey, you can trust me because you know who I'm going after and it's not you. And people believe that, that's really good gameplay, right? So like even though some people might say she's obsessed with Janelle, yada, 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 whatever the personal things you have against her, I don't really care about because this is based off gameplay right now. Her making it clear who her targets were always helps her in the game because people that weren't her targets felt like, well, then I can build something with Nicole. There's something I can actually build with Nicole, and she can be good for my game. And everyone in the season at some point went up to Nicole and basically were in a desperate situation where they felt like they needed her on their side. And that's a good position to be in. And Nicole is really good at playing a social game and then weaponizing her social game to put her in those situations where the desperate players need her, and they go to her and they need her to help them. And Nicole's very good at doing that. She did that this season really well. Um, Once again, it becomes the issue where it's like everything she did with Cody, and Cody just dictated more. So it's like if you don't make a move against Cody at some point, you just can't beat him at the end anyway. And then obviously she lost final three situation, eventually got evicted. So it really was going to come down, like the end of that game was really going to come down to who made the final move between Cody, Enzo, and Nicole. Is Enzo going to vote out Cody? Because if he does, he can win. If Nicole votes out Cody, she can win. But if Cody gets the decision and decides either one, really, he won the game. If he was in that final two, he was winning. And if he was in that final three, really, he was winning because he's pretty much guaranteed to win that final final three HOH because he was the most dominant competitor out of the three. But and that's what happened, right? Like no one made that move in time, and that's the biggest story of the season. The big story of the season is Cody, the dictator, the nice, humble dictator, the dictator people actually like, the dictator people will happily do what he says and vote for him at the end. But the dictator that if you don't take your shot against him to become the new king and to become the new queen and become the new top of the game, you lose and you have no chance. And that was the problem. People could not figure out a good time to strike against him, so they never did. And when they never struck, and they can never strike against him, they gave him all power and opportunity to take them out each one by one until he was in the perfect situation in the final two with the perfect player to be against, with the perfect person he spent the entire game working with and making moves with. He completely dictated the entire operation of the game, from who was going home what week, who was getting nominated, who would win competition. Well, I don't think Cody was that much of a dictator like Paul, like deciding who won what competitions. But Cody had more say in this season than most players will ever have in the say of the season ever. And that is the story of Big Brother 22 All Stars 2 is Cody Califor, the absolute dominating dictator, and no one brave enough to step up to the dictator. And that was the downfall of these great players and these good players and even these okay players and bad players, is no one was willing to make that move. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching this video. I love talking about Big Brother. There's going to be more Big Brother videos on the way. I have so much planned content to talk about certain people's gameplay and stuff. And I really wanted to make this video because it's been a while since I said I was going to, but I finally got around to it. If you like this video, like it, subscribe, maybe comment something. Maybe if you want me to talk about a certain player or another tier list, that would be great. There's definitely going to be more tier list ranking videos coming on the channel. So yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Peace out.